Today we will be learning about fractions and mixed numbers, how to add and subtract them. First, we're going to start with all of our vocabulary, and then we'll go through our steps, and then on the back side we will go through some examples of how to do regular fractions and how to do mixed numbers. First, we're going to start with our fractional parts. So if we have the fraction 5/8, the 5 represents our numerator. And the 8 is our denominator. The 8 is going to be the most important because you're going to have to get common denominators when dealing with fractions and adding and subtracting them. So that one is going to be important for later on, the denominator. When we do ask you to get a common denominator, then that is where you get the bottom of the fraction to look the exact same. For example, 5/8 plus 3/8. If the denominator is the same on bottom, then that means that you can go ahead and add them or subtract them. So we have a numerator, a denominator, and a common denominator means the bottom has the exact same number where we can add and then we could subtract also. The denominator always stays the exact same. We don't ever add them or subtract them. Okay, our first vocabulary word is simplify. Simplify is just another word for reduce or break it down as low as it can go. Or it could also mean converting to a mixed number. Convert to a mixed number. So if you end on a problem with an improper fraction, then you will want to convert it, which is just another word for change it back to a mixed number. So if I give you the fraction 5/10, how we reduce this or simplify it is divide by something by top and bottom. And 5 can go into both 10 and 5. So it's a common factor that could be divided into both of these. So 5 divided by 5 is 1. 10 divided by 5 is 2. Most of y'all probably could recognize that 5 out of 10 would be exactly half of the number. Or another way to simplify is if you have 15 over 5, you could go ahead and divide it if you would like. So you could say the first number, which is your dividend, your first number goes inside the house. Then the bottom number is your divisor when dividing these. This bar right here is a division bar. That little fraction bar means to divide. So 5 goes into 15 3 times. So my answer would be 3. It's okay to reduce an improper fraction all the way down to a whole number if it goes in perfectly. If it does not go in perfectly, like 18 over 4, I still divide it. 18 divided by 4. 4 cannot go into 1. 4 goes into 18 4 times, which is 16. We do have 2 remaining. Technically, we could add a decimal and bring down a 0 to make it 4.5, but we want to leave it in mixed number form when dealing with fractions. So we write 4 wholes, and I have 2 remaining out of 4 that I started with. My denominator was 4 at the beginning. If you notice this fraction right here, 2/4 can be reduced because you could divide both of these by 2. And this would end up being 4 1/2 as your final simplified number. So there's lots of different ways to simplify a number, so make sure you do that correctly. Okay, the next vocabulary is improper fractions and mixed number. Improper fractions are numbers that have a greater number on top. So 18 over 2 is improper because this number on top, the numerator, is greater. if this is a greater number, then you know when you divide this, you are going to be able to make a whole amount. This one goes out perfectly. 2 into 18 is a perfect 9. So this would be 9 wholes. But another example, 15 over 14, that would not make a perfect whole number. But this is still improper. You could still make one whole if you were to divide that. A mixed number is just a number, a whole number, with a fraction. So if I were to divide 15/14 and make it a mixed number, 14 goes into 15 once. I have one whole number, and I had one remaining out of 14 that I had started with. So this is what a mixed number looks like. It has both a whole number and a fraction. Okay, on to the steps for adding and subtracting fractions and mixed numbers. First, we always line numbers up vertically. That means up and down. So we always line our numbers up vertically. Then second, we get a common denominator. Get a common denominator. If it already has a common denominator, then that's great. You don't have to get that step. You just move on to step number 3. So step number 3 is look for any borrowing. And what I mean for that is if you see that you are subtracting, you are going to have to look to see if you're going to have to borrow with your numerators. If you cannot subtract your numerators, you're going to have to borrow from your whole number. Then step 4 is go ahead and add or subtract both numbers. Your whole numbers and your fractions. Go ahead and add them or subtract them. You should have already borrowed in step 3. Then step 5 is simplify. That also means convert to mixed number if necessary. Convert to mixed number if it's improper. So simplify, that means convert it to a mixed number if it's improper. You cannot leave it that way. Okay, let's try some examples. Flip it over. We're going to try one example of each. So first, adding fractions with different denominators. If you notice, I have 3 and I have 8. To find a common denominator, you can come down here. Sometimes you can just look at them and see, but other times it might be a little harder, so you need to write out all the multiples of 3 and 8. So if I count by 3s, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, and I could keep going on and on and on. 18, 21, 24. Then I could do the 8s. 8, 16, 24, and I hit one, 24. So that is going to be my common denominator. So I write it right up here. I know it took 8 3s. It took 8 of them to get to 24. So 3 times 8 is 24. 8 times 2 is 16. Whatever you do to the bottom, you have to do the exact same thing to the top. So 8 times, took 3 8s. So 8 times 3 is 24. 5 times 3 is 15. Now you're going to add your numerators. Add your numerators. We don't have to borrow because we're not subtracting. So we just go ahead and we add them. 6 plus 5 is 11. Carry your 1, 1, 2, 3. So 31 over 24. We cannot leave this as our answer because it's improper, that we have a larger number on top. So we need to divide this, 24 into 31. 24 goes into 3, 0. 24 goes into 31 one time. Make sure you borrow. 11 minus 4 is 7. Okay, so now we can write it. The final answer is one whole number, and 7 out of 24 left over. 7 cannot go into 24 perfectly, so it's already reduced as low as it can go. All right, let's try one with mixed numbers where they put a whole number right in front of the fraction. Okay, so we still have to get a common denominator of 4 and 3. If you count by threes, you can see 3, 6, 9, 12. 4, if you count by fours, it'd go 4, 8, and then 12. So 12 will be the number they both hit. 3 times 4 is 12. 2 times 4 is 8. Whatever you do to bottom, you got to do the top. 4 times 3 is 12. 3 times 3 is 9. So now we have our common denominator. We are able to go ahead and add our numerators. 9 plus 8 is 17 over 12, and 4 plus 2 is 6. I cannot leave it like this because I have an improper fraction. So I need to change my 17/12 by dividing. 12 goes into 17 once, and I have 5 left over. So I have 5 left over out of 12, but I already had 6 wholes, so I have to add this one extra whole onto that to make that 7 and 5 twelfths. So I added this whole number onto that whole number to make it 7 and 5 twelfths. Okay, now let's try subtracting. You have the same exact rules. You got to get a common denominator. We have already looked at 3 and 12. We know that 3 can go into 12, so that's going to be our common denominator. 3 times 4 is 12. 1 times 4 is 4. 12 times 1 is 12. 5 times 1 is 5. You didn't have to do anything to that because it already had 12. Now we can subtract our numerators. 5 minus 4 is 1/12. If you notice, that's as low as it can go. 1 can't go any lower than that. So subtracting works the exact same way as adding. You just have to make sure you get a common denominator first and that they're lined up. Last one is subtracting mixed numbers with different denominators. So we have whole numbers now. Okay, so let's look at 9 and 6. That one might be a little harder for you to think of one. So you could come down here and list them out. If you count by sixes, 6, 12, 18. If you count by nines, 9, 18. So we both hit 18. 6 times 3 made 18, so 5 times 3 is 15. 9 times 2 is 18. 4 times 2 is 8. If you look at these two numbers, I cannot subtract those. That was step 3. I cannot subtract those. I'm going to have to borrow because 8 minus 15, I can't do that. So I borrow 1 whole from my 6. That becomes a 5. I need to bring my 1 whole over here, but I don't want to write plus 1 whole. So think about what 1 whole could equal with these fractions. Look at your denominator. It is 18. So 1 whole is the same thing as 18 out of 18. So instead of writing 1 whole, I could add 18 out of 18. 18 plus the 8 that I already had, if I add those two together, it makes, not 36, 26. It makes 26. So now I have enough to be able to subtract these. I added on 1 whole amount, which was 18/18. So 26 minus 15 is 11 out of 18. Now I subtract my whole numbers. 5 minus 3 is 2. And now I have a mixed number. 11/18 is as low as it can go. Okay, so if you look at this, you have 4 total problems, 1 in each category that we want you to try and bring back tomorrow with you. And we'll go over and see if you had any questions on them.